Microphone check, 1, 2, what is this? It's the 5'7" assassin in the podcast business. I am your host, Rohan Patra, the rap music plug at your service.
Here we are again at the end of a rainbow.
The Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV is the remedy to the I don't have anything good to listen to problem. Through in-depth album and song reviews, as well as artist interviews and general rap commentary sprinkled in between on all of what the mainstream and underground rap scenes have to offer, this is your one-stop shop to knowing what to add to your queue, play next, or pop into your record player. Welcome to the show. The world of DIY art has been something that I've been indulging in and appreciating more than ever before, especially in 2021. Getting into artists like Joaquin Fox, Kuna Bear, Big Flowers, can't forget him, who did the amazing animation for this show with this handcrafted cutouts of flowers that he then turned into something that I absolutely look forward to using every single week when I make a video for this show. That idea of using whatever resources you have at your disposal, whether it be tools, programs, machines, and just creating something special has been really, really something that I've been appreciating this year. And an artist that really was at the forefront of pushing this DIY attitude in music and in hip-hop specifically was Jpegmafia. He would often create sounds that he would sample firsthand using random things he had around in his house, stemming from simple resource constraints of not being able to afford to clear samples from other people's recordings as it traditionally is done, which quickly became a trademark attraction to his music where you could expect to truly hear anything and everything pop up in a Jpegmafia instrumental. Jpegmafia, of course, also was known for this really brash and often abrasive, rebellious, nonconformist attitude in his rapping that set him apart from the crowd right from the get-go, with a funny, sly, dark humor style that I've been drawn to ever since I first heard him on the Black Ben Carson album, which just by that title tells you everything you need to know. But his career really started to pop off through the release of Veteran in 2018 that garnered widespread acclaim for its innovative sound and wild rapping performances. But it was 2019's All My Heroes Are Cornballs where I really started to love this guy's music. It was a silky smooth piece of glitch hop that heavily featured R&B flavors with gorgeous melodies, seeing JPEG embrace his more androgynous side. And now that brings us to 2021 and Jpegmafia's LP record, which is potentially going to be his last album. I'm a little unclear with how legitimate that idea is that he's going to retire, but for now it seems like that's a real possibility. But that aside, as a follow-up to All My Heroes Are Cornballs, I was really, really excited. That record was one of the best of its year when it dropped, 2019, and I really didn't expect anything less. But with Jpegmafia, at the same time, I didn't really know what to expect because I was sure that he was going to go in a different direction, not repeat himself twice, and that certainly was the case. On Cornballs, there was such an irresistible earworm effect to me where so many of the glitches, weird transitions, and short bursts of melody did a great job of creating variety and maintaining my deep engagement. It made for a highly entertaining and colorful listen for sure. But LP feels significantly more plain and bland by Peggy standards. It's like instead of being sweetened by sugar, it's sweetened with Splenda. It's still fine, but just lacks something. There's a more live and organic feeling to the instrumentals on LP that are pretty cool for the most part, certainly good. There's significant usage of live drums and true real bass lines that elevate the size of the sound, making it more fit for a stadium, which is cool for sure. Are You Happy was a bright spot on this album for sure, where the production was still diverse and layered like I'm looking for in a Peggy project, with this really nice melody interspersed in the beat with this vocal sample that I really liked. Dikembe incorporates the same sampled guitar that Dilla used on Runnin' to great effect, sounding like it was recorded specifically in these LP sessions itself. Like I love the way he worked in that sample. It was beautiful. What kind of rapping is this? And Thoughts Prayer feel big. They feel almost gospel and feature more traditional progressions in the beats that was a common theme on many of these tracks that is different than what JPEG usually does. The song structures progress in ways that you would actually expect in more traditional music. And also, there's really not much noise play at all on this album. There wasn't necessarily a lot of noise or much of any noise on All My Heroes or Cornballs either, but they really upped the ante on the glitchiness that did add a certain flavor and personality to these beats. However, it's precisely this move away from less glitchiness and noise that makes this album feel much more tame than I would have liked. Hazard Duty Pay features a smooth, soulful sample that drives the song well enough. I like it. Same with God Don't Like Ugly, that I probably like even more, just due to the quality of that vocal sample. It was just gorgeous. But again, I hate to sound like a broken record here, but there's a certain ceiling to this sound with a Jpegmafia as the performer and just based on what he is capable of. There's also some nice emphasis on traditional hip hop vibes that are a bit more meat and potatoes, cipher like almost, that I think work pretty well. The more coherent, straightforward vibes on a track like OG, I think, sounded great. Same for Tired, Nervous, and Broke with its ethereal ambient sounds that supported that really groovy, drum heavy beat. Has definitely one of the best lyrical performances too, and just had a really infectious energy and a catchiness to the songwriting that was certainly not the norm on this record, unfortunately, as it really did pop, unlike a lot of the other songs on this album. The Fire track showcases a lot of live drumming and dope, intricate percussion too, that I think was pretty solid. But overall, there is a lot more space to these instrumentals. They're sounding a lot less claustrophobic than his past production efforts, which I sort of miss because I don't think this is the type of sound that someone like Peggy is truly special at executing. I think he's just more so pretty good. And that now brings us away from the production side of things to the rapping side of things, which kind of starts to put the pieces together as to why this album is just lacking something. Lyricism and overall pure rapping from Jpegmafia has never been his selling point. He's always been a capable rapper with fiery and often militant lyricism that was engaging. But on this album, these songs demand more. They're more dependent on this dimension of his music being stronger. Because the very invigorating glitchiness of his sound of past has been replaced with this more smoothed out production and songwriting style. There's more space to be filled with JPEG's vocals as a result, which requires a stronger rapping performance or vocal performance, singing even, than what typically Peggy can provide. LP is an album that at its core, it tries something new. It definitely doesn't try to repeat the same old formulas, which is commendable, but it just doesn't play to JPEG's strengths. It lacks the explosive aggression of a veteran, as well as the sugary sweetness in the melodies on Cornballs that I just absolutely adored. LP mixes all of his previous styles and adds some new live musical elements into this blender of sound, but unfortunately it just lacks the charm of his previous work and instead just comes off a bit dry. I would be remiss also not to mention the Arm & Hammer and Elucid disses that come up multiple times on this album, which stems from a snafu that Elucid and Peggy had over some recycled beats. that JPEG used for other artists like IDK, which seemingly Elucid did not know about, wasn't properly informed, and then some poor communication ensued from there, which was then followed by Elucid actually dissing Jpegmafia on the Shrines track Leopards back in 2020, and then JPEG took his turn to respond on this latest record. Since the release of LP, though, to be clear, it seems like they have patched things up, and I'm glad, because I would love to see another collaboration between the two. I both like them quite a bit, and in Lucid's case, just absolutely love his music. But also because JPEG's disses, man, they were not up to snuff. He was fighting outside of his weight class, to say the least, with a lyricist like Elucid on the other side. But also just the disses on LP just felt very clumsy and strange. He was dissing Billy Woods in this too, which I don't know. Maybe something behind the scenes kind of inspired that, but it just wasn't a good look. But I don't want you to get it twisted that this album is bad. Over time, I have grown to like a lot of elements of this record. That Jpegmafia feature on Rebound, and just the song in general, how the beat kind of evolves when it hits this guest verse, is super dope. It has a really relentless energy, something that did remind me of Veteran, that made it stick out for sure. And something else that I have to give JPEG a lot of credit for is that, again, although the lyrical performances and the switches in musical style aren't necessarily my preference, I have to commend him for just how well he realized this sound and put this album together, because there is such an impressive cohesion and flow to this record that can't be ignored. Songs seamlessly transition into one another really well, whether it's just like a slight variation or like little musical detour interlude that flows really well into the next track. That happens consistently. And generally speaking, the changes to this sound were consistently applied throughout this album. There were no songs that stuck out like a sore thumb where they felt like they were previously recorded for one of those other records that he's already released. There was a clear focus on this album that was executed, I think, with very strong precision, even again if the end result wasn't my cup of tea. But all of that is to say, Jpegmafia's LP is a solid record. It's a good attempt at evolving his sound, making it feel a bit bigger, making it feel a bit more organic, and also saw him adopting, as I mentioned earlier, some different kind of song structures that are a little more accessible, and I think the results were pretty solid. But overall, it lacked that character, that special earworm like weirdness in some of the melodies, or just some of the raw, off-the-wall aggression and explosiveness that I've come to love from Jpegmafia. So I give Jpegmafia's LP a high 6 on 10. So there we have it, another episode of the Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV. I hope this episode gave you some new perspectives and insights into what the greatest art form known to man in hip-hop music has to offer. If you want to support the show in the most meaningful way possible, it would be my absolute honor to have you as a patron in the new Rap Music Plug podcast Patreon. Through this Patreon, you will be getting exclusive content such as bonus episodes, exclusive album recommendations, exclusive playlists, early access to episodes, and more. And above all, though, you will be able to support the show directly in a way that will not only justify the crazy amount of time I spend on this show already, but allow me to cover some of the expenses related to supporting all of these great artists that we cover on the show through the website, and will allow us to sustain and build on this amazing growth that the RMPP has experienced recently. Big shout out to Levy, Mahima, Jeff, Fatman Toom, and Khalid for your generous support through the Patreon. I really appreciate it. So if you have any questions about any of the Patreon stuff, or just want to keep tabs on the show, interact with me on rap music and all the great stuff that we can talk about, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rapmusicplugpod, or shoot me an email at qlctv.podcast@gmail.com. You can also rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify as well. But that's enough self-promotion for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.